Today on the MEPS Podcast, we are hosting Art De LaFuente, and he is going to talk about his 20 years in the Air Force, how quickly things can change in the Air Force, and how he almost lost everything, and how he ended up retiring after 20 years, but he was a millionaire from what he was doing on the side before he even retired. Art has a really interesting story, so I'm really excited that you guys get to hear it today on this episode. And Art and I go back to 2018, the year that I was getting out of the Air Force. He had actually found Airman Vision, had reached out to me, and we've stayed in touch ever since. Last year, he ended up coming to Vegas, so we got to meet each other for the very first time, which is a really cool thing with the Air Force in general, is you meet people from all over the place. Now with doing this podcast, I get to reach back out to a bunch of people that I crossed paths with while I was in, or people that I've crossed paths with since getting out. A common theme that you see throughout the MEPS podcast series is that networking is going to be massive. And thankfully with this platform, this is one of the ways that I can share my network with all of you. Now, if you're in the process of joining the Air Force or you know somebody that is, be sure to share with them Airman Vision. We have over 200 videos on YouTube for free. Plus, we have resources like the BMT workout program, the Air Force BMT prep guide, and an Air Force course available at airmanvision.com. But with all of that being said, let's jump into the interview. All right, Art. So what was your resume before joining the Air Force, and how old were you when you joined?
So I started working really young when I was 14. Started off as a dishwasher and then moved up to a cook and then started doing catering events for a barbecue place down in South Texas. So my resume, was cooking in the kitchen or doing catering or cooking briskets out back. Other than that, I helped people wherever I could, but I did schoolwork and stuff. Yeah, so as soon as I turned 17, I had my mom sign up, and I was like, hey, I want to go to the Air Force, make you proud. So
you joined very, very young then. Weren't even old enough to sign your life away. You had to have a guardian do it for you. So once you joined the Air Force, one, what was your initial contract for job-wise? And then how long did you do that? Did you do that your entire time? How many years do you stay? And kind of walk through your entire Air Force resume.
Yeah, so originally I had planned to come in for 4 years, right? I just kind of wanted to get out of my situation, and my mom asked me to do her a favor. And my mom is an amazing woman, and she dedicated her time and energy into raising me, right? And so more so than my father, and so I was like, you know what, Mom, I'm going to do this for you. So I was like, I'm going to do 4 years. I show up to the recruiter's office, and he's like, all right, man, what do you think you want to do? Like, what's your skill set? And I was like, well, I'd seen Top Gun, and for some reason I thought, that's why I have the helmet back here. For some reason I thought that Top Gun was based on the Air Force at the time, right? I was young, didn't know. So I was like, I'd like to fly the airplanes. He's like, you can't do that. You need a degree in pilot's license. I was like, okay. Can I work on them? He's like, yeah. Little did I know that's like one of the fields that they need, right? Security forces and crew chiefs.
Yeah.
So I came in as a crew chief, and while I was sitting there in the office, he's like, if you do 6 years, we'll give you $12,000 to enlist. I was like, 12 grand. The most money I'd ever seen at that time was like $800. Yeah. Like that was like a good payday for me. So
what year was this?
That was in 2000. So that was 99 when I was talking to him.
Yeah. So, $12,000 then would be, that was a decent amount of money for a 17-year-old as well. So,
oh yeah, it was a nice chunk of change, man. So I decided to come in for 6 years because of the bonus,
Yeah.
And fortunately I did, because right at like your 4 or 5 year mark, you start kind of getting tired, especially working the flight line. So I came in as a F-15 mechanic. So they, went through tech school. They trained me up to work on F-15s, go out to Mountain Home, Idaho, and that was my first base. I'm kind of like a weed. You can put me anywhere and I'll make the best of it. I just kind of grow wherever I'm at. Yeah, so I went to Mountain Home, Idaho, and then started working on the F-15. Did as well as I could on that aircraft. And then over time through my career, I was one of the fortunate ones. They unlocked our AFSE, right? So I came in as a fighter jet mechanic. And so you had to get specialized in F-15s, 16s, or A-10s. The 22 wasn't out at the time, but so I was a 15 guy. About 4 years in my career, when you started to get tired, fortunately we had an F-16 squadron that was going away. They were converting over to F-15s, and so they sent me over there as one of the subject matter experts to help them get trained to work on F-15s. But we had both aircraft on the flight line, so I got to learn how to work on the F-16, and then I was super excited because I was like, yes, I get to work on 2 airframes. I'm super cool, Like, they unlocked our AFSE and they said, hey, if you're a fighter guy, you're a fighter on anything, right? You can work on anything. Later on, the Air Force found out that that was a mistake, right? They should have kept their experience on one airframe. But I was very fortunate because I got to experience more fighter aircraft after that, right? So in my entire career, I got to work the F-15, F-16, F-22, and the A-10. And that's actually like trained, certified, qualified to do engine runs on all those airframes. So I'm one of the few people that can say that, and then they turn around and lock down the AFSCs again, and they're like, you're stuck on this aircraft. And so I'm really grateful for that experience, but going through it, every time I got to a base, and they're like, you're working on the F-16 now, let's say, right? I had to go become an airman again. And I remember one time I was a tech sergeant, right? So I'd been in like 10 years at this point. And my chief was like, hey, welcome to the squadron. Like, I need you to get out on the flight line and walk the ramp and work it and teach these young kids. And so I did, but I was a young airman, so I had no choice but to act like, I didn't know anything and learn. I was learning from people that were, a fraction of the time, had been in a fraction of the time that I had.
You had to relearn from the beginning how that airframe worked.
And I got some amazing insight. I had these young airmen that did an amazing job, and I got to learn from them. And then I would use my previous experience on other aircraft and bring it in. One time that I can remember, this is really odd thing that happened that I thought was pretty cool. I got to use my experience on the F-22. I got to the F-22, and that's a brand new jet, right? I mean, this is like working on the dealership, right? Dealership car, brand new. And I come from the 15 world where it's like, it's been around for some while, it's tested. And they're putting an engine in, and the engine gets stuck. I had been on the flight line maybe like 4 months at that time on the F-22. So I look at the airmen, and they're like, oh, it's stuck. And I was like, oh, it's not a big deal. Take the tongue off the engine trailer and use it to pry the engine off the frame. So I took the tongue off. I showed it in the airframe, and I'm the highest ranking there, by the way, but I'm the least knowledge, right? So stick it up there, boom, engine falls in. We get it in. After that, I found out that airframe is very critical for stress and fractures on the sides. So I was teaching the airmen how to do things the wrong way, but it's the old mentality where you bring it in and you're like, this is the way it's always been done. So I had to realize really quick that the old way isn't always the right way, and different airframes have different tolerances. And I had to be very cognizant of that as I went through my career.
You ended up doing how many years in the Air Force?
I ended up doing 20 years in the Air Force. When I retired, I retired as a master sergeant. I did 20 years in 0 days. You're supposed to do 20 years in 1 day. I got away with the 0 days, just the math happened. I wanted to get out at my 20-year mark because throughout my career, I had started working on myself. As a young airman, I love the Air Force, but I also knew that I had to build something up for myself on the outside. So I started working as a roofer. Like, I would work night shift. So I'd go in at like 10 o'clock at night, getting off at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I got a roofing job. And then so I'd get off of work, go to a civilian roofing job, and then I'd come home, go to sleep, take a nap, wake up, and go to the Air Force again. I was getting paid as a roofer. I was getting paid as a airman in the Air Force. And then on the weekends, I was fixing cars. Doing all these things, even though at the time I was keeping myself busy, I was excited, I was young, it was fun.
You had the energy to do all of that.
Yeah, bro. And I didn't realize like the skills that I was learning along the way, dude. Helping people has brought me so much success in my life. Just because, someone asks you like, hey, can you help me install tile? And then you go and you help them and you learn a new skill that you would have otherwise not learned, right? So I was able to acquire a bunch of skills. And through that process, I didn't really know what to do with my money. I grew up really poor. So I was born in the US, and then I was raised in Mexico till I was 8 years old. When I came to the US, I didn't speak English. English is my second language. I'm used to like living in a hut with dirt floors and no doors or windows. It was pretty normal growing up that way for me. So now that I ran into a little bit of money, I didn't go and buy anything crazy. I was just saving it away. And then I learned about finances, and that really took it to a next level because I started investing my money and making it work for me. Even being in the Air Force like 6 years, like I was taking the little that I had and just budgeting it properly. And then I bought a house and another house, and then I ended up with 5 houses, and my stocks are doing good, and my investments, my TSP, my IRAs are all doing good. At like my 12-year mark in the Air Force, I really had enough assets and investments that I didn't have to do the Air Force anymore long term, right? Like I didn't have to stay in 30 years. I was like, okay, I could get out and make a decent income, but I'm going to write out the 20 years because that was the pride that I had. I committed to serving my country. And I was like,
Yeah.
dude, I'm going to do 20 years. Like, and it's fun, dude. Like you're sitting at the smoke pit, everybody's joking. You're in the back of the truck launching fighter jets. Like, how cool is that, right? Traveling the world, like living like a rock star, but you're in the Air Force.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was able to do that. And then probably at like my 12 or 13 year mark, I started my own company accidentally. I was helping somebody. I just volunteered to help some dude and we started teaching courses and it was 100% volunteer based. Fortunately for me, I was in England. The company ended up shutting down and they're like, we're not going to offer those services. And I was super passionate at this point because I'd accumulated so many assets that I thought, man, this is a good opportunity to help young airmen. And so I started doing it for like $40 for nothing. It was just to pay for the application fees, right?
Yeah.
Well, my wife at the time, she's like, bro, if you're working all these hours, like there better be some money coming in or you need to quit. Like there's no way you're putting in all this commitment to help your troops, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all this time I've helped people. They're always they always had their own businesses, right? Like all these owners that I talked to. So I was like, I'll just start it up. And so I started a company and then I wanted to make it free for airmen. We got into the government piece where we got the government to fund that. And that just blew up. The whole time I'm like, whoa, don't blow up yet. Like I need to get out. You know what I'm saying? Like, because at the time I was still in. I was able to grow the company to 26 employees at the time. And we were providing our services all around the world. So by my 20-year mark, I was anxious to get out because, you know, at that point, the company had grown so large. I was making more money staying home than I was coming to work.
You weren't waiting to get out to start something. You had already started it and it was thriving before you even got out.
I knew a few things during my career. One, I knew that I didn't want to work for a company. Like when I got out, like I didn't want to follow the corporate routine. Like I'd seen people go into the corporate jobs and I saw them put on this suit. And not only that, like as a crew chief, as a maintainer, you have nothing but dark humor to keep you entertained, you know? To take that to the corporate world, it wasn't really accepted. It's not politically correct. And so
to say the least.
Yeah. It gets pretty bad. I was like, you know what, man? Like I need to do work for myself and keep this going and I need to grow it. I started investing in other companies and then building other things and helping more people. And it just kept flourishing and it just snowballed from there, you know? Yeah, that's how I ended up with the tattoos on my hands because I didn't want to ever go get a job and work for anybody. So that was like my reminder to myself
to work.
Don't go get a real job. Yeah. Make this work, bro. Or like nobody's going to hire you because you look like a convict. But I have a lot of good experience from the Air Force.
You said you started this company, right? Where you were helping train people once you were on your way out. Since getting out, what is now your resume since getting out?
So I ended up getting out in 2020. I really walked out in 2019 because I ended up doing an internship, right? So I'm a big believer in taking advantage of the opportunities that are afforded to you. Yep. And the Air Force has a wonderful program called SkillBridge. Even though I was running my own company, I couldn't intern for my own company. I didn't find it morally and ethically proper to do that either.
Yep.
So I figured, you know what? I know the restaurant business, the catering business. So I'm going to go to San Antonio, intern to do catering and restaurant stuff. Because at this point, I figured if there was something else that I was going to go into, that could be a space, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to like dip my toes a little bit. And so I did the SkillBridge. So I got out in 2019, came to San Antonio and did my final 6 months interning for a catering company and a restaurant.
And for those that don't know what SkillBridge is, that's where essentially you get your Air Force paycheck every 1st and 15th. You're still getting paid by the Air Force and you're doing an unpaid internship with another company on the civilian side. Basically, it's to bridge the gap so you have experience as a civilian before you become a civilian. So the Air Force essentially pays you for your last 6 months. You get your foot in the door on the civilian side. And so it's supposed to be an unpaid internship or some sort of like job shadowing that you get to follow. And the Air Force is paying you for that transition.
For anybody that doesn't know about it or is looking to do it, it was the best decision I ever made in my life, on top of many other things. But this was one of the biggest things that really impacted me because I was able to be a civilian with a military ID card and still active duty. I had to start figuring out, like, what are you going to wear on a daily basis? What people expect of you at a regular job, right? And the expectation is that they at least offer you a job if you're doing good work with them. And so then the idea is you seamlessly transition from interning from them to working with them. I started doing that and that was a wonderful transition. So I was able to pad my resume a little bit there with some catering and restaurant experience. And then I started volunteering for UTSA in San Antonio for the marketing department. I was on the board for the university. And I wanted to get involved with the university because my company deals with education. And I felt it was a good segue to kind of bridge the gap between that industry and help me grow my company larger while I do something good for the community. I went back to my company, right? And you're asking me what my resume looks like. I ended up building a marijuana company, medicinal marijuana company out of Oklahoma. And so we were able to grow that very quick. I mean, it was ridiculous how the medicinal marijuana was exploding at the time. I decided to step away from that. That was actually a project to help a friend. I ran across an old Air Force friend. This is something else that I really think that was very valuable in my career, was networking and maintaining relationships, never burning a bridge, right? Never being the smartest person in the room, because nobody likes the smartest person in the room. So just be humble and be normal. Ran across an old friend, tech sergeant, got out of the military, medically retired, wasn't doing too much with his life, and they were struggling with some help. And I was like, hey, dude, what do you want to do? And he's like, I love medicinal marijuana, and I have friends and all the things. I'll help you build a business out of it. You follow my lead. Buy me a Lamborghini when we're done, if it helps you. Worst case scenario, we spend a little time building some companies you get some experience in. Now, the medicinal marijuana flourished. The medicinal marijuana company did. Also, along the way, I had a small dog collar company, which failed miserably. But hey, it's always good to list your wins and list your losses, right? Like, not everything is a win. So yes, I had a dog collar company and messed with that for a little bit. And since then, started getting into the music production, started investing in different projects. We invested in, I say we, I mean the company. Mm-hmm. We invested in a Netflix documentary that had veterans working the cinematography behind the scenes. And so we were investors in that. So I got to see what music and video production were. That opened up some new doors and new relationships with different artists and celebrities that I would have never expected to come across otherwise. And currently, I've recently shrank everything back down and gone back to my main bread and butter, which is I want to grow my company. And I'm currently working on a project. I don't want to discuss the project, but I'm currently working on a project that I've been sitting on for about 5 years now. As you go through life, you start noticing, and you become an expert at like whatever industry you're in, you start noticing little things that you're like, I could improve that and make it better. Yep. And then eventually you get to a point where you're like, dude, that doesn't exist. Like, if I built this thing, it could be a monster. Yep. And so I've been sitting on it. And so I'm like, finally, the stars aligned and I have the time and am able to spend some time with an amazing partner who's going to help me grow this and see where it goes. That's kind of where I'm at. So my resume, really, I built, 2 other companies, one that didn't do so hot and one that blew up, and then invested in a ton of projects. So
your current company that you own, what is that company and what do you do with that? So, and this is the company that you started building when you were still in.
Correct. Yeah, that's aircraftmaintainer.com. And so what we do is we certify aircraft mechanics with civilian certifications so that they can get out and get a job in the civilian sector. So the Air Force does an amazing job of training you and giving you the experience of working on airplanes, but you don't have the civilian certifications that are equivalent. Yep. And so that's where we come in and we help with those certifications, and government funded and stuff. So there is a market cap on that company, because we are providing, the majority of our customers are military members, right? Mm-hmm. And we've expanded into the civilian sector. We currently we have a contract with Boeing. We have a government contract with the Army. And then we work with the Air Force members, which is where we start off with. But we're capped out as far as like industries that we can get into with our certifications. Yeah. And I also tied our hands because we're so specific, aircraft maintenance, right? Yeah. And so this new project that I'm working on is a little bit more broad, can service more people. It's equivalent of selling coffee. Anybody can drink coffee, right? Yeah. You don't want everybody to be your customer, but you definitely want it to be a lot bigger than a coffee drinker that drinks decaf, that likes creamer. And so we just want to expand a little bit.
So what you do now is very different than being a crew chief when you were in. So you took your experience while you were in as a crew chief, you did other things. You've always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. You've been able to build on that, but your life today is much different than it was working a flight line back then. So you kind of have done 2 different career paths, one that you did while you were in and your career path out.
My life is completely different from being a crew chief. I could have never imagined where I would be sitting today if you would have told me this when I was younger. Basically, I think overall, in the end, I have a few like little slogans that I live by that I've stuck to that have worked well for me. And one of them is like, set yourself a goal and a dream to achieve and make it ridiculous. Who gives a shit? like, sorry, I don't know if I could cuss, but
No, you're good.
make it ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Try to fly that spaceship to the moon, right? And then if you can't get out of our atmosphere, well, you didn't really lose. You know what I'm saying? Like, you still make progress, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing is focus on what you're doing and stick to that. Like, too often, even myself, you make the mistake of diversifying in different fields because something hits and you're like, oh, well, I'll diversify in these other things that I'll try. And you water yourself down.
You
And
spread
so I
yourself
believe,
way too thin.
yeah, and you've got the time commitments. If you're spread thin, you're not too successful on a lot of the projects, right? Your
Right.
best bet is to focus on the one. If it
Time,
doesn't work out,
resources, and energy. You
yeah,
only have so
100%.
much of each of those.
Yeah, today my life really revolves around very similar things, similar ideals, right? I continue to help people. It's just a different type of helping.
Yep.
And today I get to hang out with a lot of cool people, which, by the way, for anybody that's wondering, you know, there's a saying, I can't really think of the saying right this second, but it's like, you don't want to meet your role models. Have you ever heard that saying?
Don't meet your heroes. And when you admire someone from afar, you often build up an idealized version of them in your mind, which may not match reality.
That is 100% correct. So you don't really want to meet your heroes, I'll tell you. I am fortunate to be around a lot of very successful people, like really big people that I would have never thought I could be sitting in the same room with. Quite honestly, I think I loved all of them more when I didn't know them. I love the idea of who they were and what they did.
Yeah.
But then when you start getting into these rooms, the dynamics change, right? You go from observing somebody and admiring what they've built or created
Yeah.
and
Or
putting them on
the
a
brand that they've created. So like
correct.
what they want people to know them as versus, yeah.
Correct. And then when you get put in the same room, you realize, oh, I get it. It's just a regular another business. It's just a facade. You're just another corporation, right? Or another thing. I think that's one of the big takeaways that I've learned recently. And that's the biggest difference from being a crew chief to now. When I was a crew chief, my friends were loyal and real, and they would pick up the phone and call you when they were hurting, and you did the same. In the civilian world, it's what can you do for me kind of world. Transitioning to the civilian sector for me has been extremely difficult. I am so glad I didn't have to go work a corporate job or have to go get a regular, 9 to 5. As I sit here today, now that I've retired and I'm out and my life is very different, I don't seem to really understand how the civilian world works. And I mean, I've been out now for 4 years, coming up on 5 years, right? And it's not that I don't understand it. I'm smart enough to understand how it works.
Yeah.
It's actually putting into practice what needs to be done in the civilian industry compared to the way I was when I was in the Air Force. I say if you're in the Air Force, cherish those people around you, continue to do the loyalty thing, continue to be normal, and be a good friend and a good person, because that's the right thing to do, right? If you're going to transition and get out and think it's the same, it's not. And that's why there's so many veteran groups, right? So many of these
So people
groups
look for that
together.
community because it's different. Yeah. You relate better with veterans because people that haven't served, it is a very different style of
Yeah.
community.
Oh, 100%.
And that's something that I've learned too as well, like getting out. Like my friends back home before I joined, very tight-knit community, everybody hangs out. Like you could just be like, hey, I'm coming over for dinner. And like that was kind of like a normal thing. In the military too, is like it was pretty tight-knit. And my friends back home before joining were the same way, and they're still that way today. But after getting out, I've lived in Vegas for over 2 years now. And everybody that I associate with now haven't been to their houses. They haven't been to mine. I've invited people over. People like it's a different relationship and friendship. And like when I was in the military, like you would just go knock on people's dorm doors and like wake them up or hey, we're going and hanging out. Like it was so tight knit that you could literally go wake somebody up and be like, yo, get in my car.
Yeah.
Like we're going out. Now it's like pulling teeth to try to get people to like spend time together. And like you said, it's like, well, what are you going to do for me? Like that kind of community aspect isn't so much there as it was in the military and in even my life before. And so yeah, it can be extremely hard to transition out because sometimes building a community, especially if you move somewhere new, or like you said, you went to San Antonio after, you go somewhere new and you're trying to build a community from scratch after the military, man, it's tough.
It's definitely challenging, that's for sure. And I've ran across a few really good people that I resonate with. Like we have similar values and we enjoy the same things. And they've really, have a handful of people that have opened up and they treat me just as good as many of the people that I was in with. But for the majority, It's challenging to find people that you resonate with. And interesting, I don't know if you ran across the same situation, but getting out, there's also a different level of military members, right? So I was at a video shoot one day and ran across a Navy SEAL, ex-Navy SEAL, 20-year Navy SEAL, right? We instantly hit it off. We become friends, but he was a SEAL. It's a different level of, I'm an aircraft mechanic, right? So,
Yeah.
and he's a great, humble guy, but the way he operates, I mean, this guy wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning and goes, running 20 miles and then comes home, showers, and starts his day. And to me, as an aircraft mechanic, is like, I mean, I love to turn wrenches at 5 o'clock in the morning, but I'm definitely not going to go for a run. It's just different types of people. Then I ran across a few Army Rangers. They're a different caliber of people. They start telling you their stories, a lot of different levels amongst the veterans. And so something that I've learned when I got out was stop comparing yourself to other people in the veteran space. Yeah. I've never compared myself to other people in the regular world, right? But in the veteran space, it'll hurt you more than it'll do help you. If I saw a veteran friend of mine that was an Army Ranger that was an amputee, I, one, wouldn't treat him like an amputee. And two, I wouldn't compare myself and say, oh, he had it rougher than I did. Yeah, of course he did. He doesn't, he's missing a leg or whatever, right? Yeah. Of course he did. But why am I going to sit here and knock down my service or even like compare us? Like, you know what? We're veterans. We're both out. Let's have a good time. Let's help each other in any way we can now. That was challenging for me, was to kind of like stop comparing myself to others. Everybody has their own form of success. When you get out, you tend to resonate with the veteran space. So I kind of always ended up talking to veterans. Like veterans, immediately we became friends. Mm-hmm. But then when I was in that room, I was like, but that's a Navy SEAL. Oh, well, this guy was special ops. Oh, you worked finance? You handled papers all day? Like, because in the Air Force, we used to joke and we joke back and forth, like, you really don't work. You work in the gym, or whatever.
It's really just jealousy speaking at that point. No,
100% jealousy, honestly. Yeah. I had that conversation this morning, actually. I was talking to a kid that just joined, and he's a security forces guy. I was like, what do your hours look like? He's like, I work 11 hours a day minimum. Man, if you could go back in time, you think you'd do like NPF or something? And he's like, emotionally, I wouldn't, because I love my job. He's like, but if you look at it just from a pure business standpoint, like, of course. And who wouldn't, right? Yeah. So
it's like, you get paid the same paychecks, just sometimes you're working twice as much as some other people. Same paycheck at the end of the day. So
yeah, currently just working on hitting new goals, right? Every time I hit my goal, I kick the can down the road so that I got to chase it. My original goal when I was like 14 years old, I had a red Lamborghini Countach on my bedroom wall. And I was like, one day, never thought I could achieve it. I was like, I want to own a Lamborghini. Then I got to the point where I could pick one up. And then it's like, okay, now what do I do? Well, so my next goal that I currently have set for myself is to buy an HA-60. So I want to get a helicopter. Obviously, do I think I can achieve it? Like, yeah, eventually, maybe, right? Yeah. Maybe not, but that's what I'm going to go for. Do I need a helicopter? No, nobody does.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, I'd probably get there and then not even get the darn thing. And then I'll just come up with a new goal. But it's what
the fact
drives
that you
me.
could if you wanted to. So
yeah, and it's what drives me. Like, I just need a goal, bro. Like, just give me a goal to go chase. Like, throw that stick out like a puppy and I'll go get it. And then I'll come back and it's like, all right, throw it again. I think that's what makes it fun.
So what was your best experience? I know you did 20 years, to the day. I know it's kind of hard to choose. Like,
it's kind of not even that exciting, but it was exciting to me. And it's the most memorable, right? And I've had some ridiculous experiences, but I'm going to tell you the most memorable one in me. I was a young airman. I'd been I think I was in like 4 years at this point, senior airman. And they're like, hey, we need somebody to deploy downrange. And I was like, I can do it. Like, I'm gun ho, right? Like, I can do all of it. All the things. And we had an NCO that was supposed to go with us. It was me and him. At the time I was working in a facility where we did dispatch center, right? Maintenance operations center. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but they control operations on the flight line via radios. It's a small operation that can be handled by a few people, but you need experience. The NCO last minute, something happened, dropped out. They couldn't find anybody to fill him. So immediately I was put in charge. And they're like, you're going downrange. You're going to set it up. You're going to figure it out. At the time, it was really scary. And then I get there and I'm like, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this, right? I put all the things together. Everybody's super proud of what I'm able to accomplish. They're asking me for my opinion on who I need to run the operations center. So I was able to get an airman. I was able to train them up, tell them what to do, create schedules. At my age and my level of experience, I shouldn't have been in that position. That's the most memorable one that I can think of. And then I topped it off on my way home because I was by myself and I was low ranking compared to the rest of the unit. They're like, hey, you did a really good job, but you really don't belong with the aircraft unit. You're kind of an outsider, right? Was it like a support agency? So
it was mock, right?
Yeah, it was mock.
Mock, yeah.
So they kind of forget about you, right? So the reason it's so memorable is because not only was I put in charge and able to run a successful operation and people were really happy with what I was doing, on my way back, they forgot about me. They didn't send me back on the same plane, right? I was off the manifest. They came up with it. They needing a LOX technician. Well, I was a crew chief, so I was like, I know how to operate a LOX cart, which is an oxygen cart that we use to service the aircraft.
For liquid
when
oxygen.
when they ship this liquid oxygen on airplanes, somebody's got to vent it and purge it, right? So it doesn't explode in the airplane. And I was like, I'll do it. Like I was super confident at that point, right? Like I just done so well. They put me on a C5, and I hopped all the way back to the U.S. It took me like 17 days because that damn plane kept breaking. But bro, the first day
kept breaking.
yeah.
The pilot's like, yeah, this button's doing something weird. We're gonna have to be here for 3 days.
Yeah. So the first day on the way back, I vented that LOX card. I was like, I'm just going to vent it all out. Why do I keep adjusting these valves? So I just let the darn thing off, let the oxygen go out, and I never had to worry about the damn card again. So I just chilled and had fun and had a great time. That was the most memorable experience, was being deployed in a situation that was very uncomfortable and then actually being successful at these responsibilities that were entrusted upon me. So,
and sometimes we have the skills and the abilities too. We just have never been able to do it fully on our own. So it's more scary just thinking about it than it is actually doing it, because you know how to do it sometimes. And so once you start going through the motions, you're like, oh yeah, I can run this or do this. And it was more scary in your head thinking about it. And then once you do it, you're like, why was I so nervous or scared? Like, I know how to do this stuff.
You know, you're never given that kind of responsibility when you're a young airman. You know, they tell you what to do. They tell you where to be, everything, what to learn, what to study, what to test on, when to go to your appointments. And so to be in that position where I had an opportunity to flourish and be successful in that thing, in that job, and then doing it was, it's the most memorable.
So then let's flip this around. What was your worst experience in the Air Force that you can remember? I mean, you were in maintenance. You got to have some. You got to have some.
Well, all right, let's go south real quick. I'm going to be honest.
I mean, that's the thing is joining the military. It's going to come with its pros and its cons. So we have to be realistic with everybody as well. There's going to be some tough things.
This was really challenging. I don't know if this is what you meant by challenging, but I'm going to tell you my story. So I opened my eyes and there's blood everywhere and people are running. And I'm like, why are people running? Why is there blood on my hands? Why am I holding a knife and a cell phone? Basically, we were at a party. I got drunk. I blacked out. Next thing you know, I come to, have a knife in my hand, a phone, and people are running away. I'm like, what is going on here? Chuck them in the trash. I'm walking back to my room. There's blood all up the stairwells in the hallway. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Everybody had been drinking. Cops come out eventually. I fell asleep, woke up, and I had cleaned as much as I could, apparently, in my drunkenness. They came to and they said, hey, there was an incident last night and you were part of it. And you took out a knife and you stabbed a technical sergeant. I was a staff sergeant with a line number for tech sergeant, and he was a tech sergeant. I was like, dude, that's not I definitely did not do that. But I definitely did wake up. The number one thing they told me to do is shut up, don't answer any questions, get a lawyer. And I mean, I knew that as a crew chief, right? Because we're always getting into trouble, not like this, but
yeah.
So fortunately for me, I had helped so many people along the way. I had always been doing, at this point, remember, I had all my real estate and stuff. So I was doing real estate classes for people. I was doing tax reduction classes for people for free on the flight line, just helping people. So they take 10 people into an interview room. Nobody remembered anything, apparently. So they charged me with drunk and disorderly. The individual that got cut said he fell on a beer bottle. They tried getting any more story out of him. He didn't say anything. So anyways, I got charged. Very minimal. I ended up quit drinking for a couple of years, and I ended up getting my...
It's because you probably learned your lesson, hopefully.
Oh, it scared me. It was the scariest thing that I've ever been through. It was the worst experience. I had to pick up the phone and call my wife. And on the other line, she's like, hey, how's it going? And I was like, are you sitting down? And she's like, yeah, what's up? Are you okay? I don't know. I'm being told that I need to call you. I need to talk to somebody because this is after I'd been interviewed and stuff. And I need to tell somebody what happened. And you're the only person that I have by my side that I feel like I don't, I couldn't call my mom. My mom would freak out, I couldn't. And not only that, I'd be letting so many people down, know? And so I told her, and she said, the best thing ever. She's like, I've got your back. No matter what happens, we can get through this. And that carried me through everything. I ended up losing my job because of it. They put me in a support section and line numbers went away and paycheck was hurting. But eventually I came back, right? It wasn't about monetary. It was just, what did I do and how did I get here is what ended up happening.
Yeah.
So very quickly, your life can change in an instant. And that's something that I didn't recognize before that happened.
Yeah. When we're younger too, we feel like we're invincible. Like,
so
sometimes it takes, one of those situations to wake you up to be like, oh.
I was able to, 100%. And I was able to, fortunately, maybe like 3 or 4 years later, I ran into a guy, I was TDY, and I ran into a guy at the BX. And he's like, Art De LaFuente. I was like, yeah, hey, what's up, man? He's like, hey, man, you remember when that dude pushed you against the brick wall and you smashed your head on the wall and you took out a knife and stabbed him? And I was like, whoa, what happened? And I was like, is that what really? And that all made sense. Then I was like, oh, so I was defending myself. That's why he didn't rat me out. In the end, I realized a couple of things. Dude, alcohol has led me nowhere good, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the scariest moments. And then two, even in the worst of situations, I still maintained my original character. I was always a good person. I happened to be defending myself that time, but I didn't know that because I couldn't remember it.
How long did that process take for all the investigations? I know you said you lost your line number. So for those of you that are in the process of joining and don't know what that means, it means you had tested against your peers. You had performed in the top 15% that was getting promoted. So you had a promotion number. You knew you were getting promoted at a certain date because you were among your top peers, but you had not been promoted yet. And so essentially they stripped that from you. So you were an E5 at the time trying to make E6. You had been approved for E6, but not till a certain date. You were waiting for that date. That's when you got in trouble. You lost that promotion. So you had to wait a whole nother year again, or I don't know what it is if you lose your line number, if you had to wait another 2 years to test again. But it definitely affected your career trajectory as far as what rank you could achieve in a certain amount of time.
Yeah, and my annual review was affected, right? Because now when my annual review came out, it's like, hey, you did something bad. So
they can't rate you as a top airman because you you had that incident.
Even though I kept that one, I was rated as a very top airman. So it was like the most positive everywhere with like crazy cool stuff that I was still doing because I've always done too many things, right? Except for that one mark that said, hey, drunk and disorderly. Yeah. And I was fortunate that that's all I got away with. I really wish I could go back in time and it never happened. I had to learn from that lesson and move on with my life. But that set me back. I mean, that honestly, if I had to put a time frame on it, it set me back a good 3 years. And then I ended up making master. But by that point, I was like at my 18-year mark. But before that, I was on track to, you're talking to a guy who was like at my 10-year mark. I went and got my degree just to get an opportunity to take advantage of it, So
this is what I always tell people. I did not do that. And that's one of the things I look back, I was like, do not be like me. I'm like, go get your education while you're in. It's so much easier to do while you're in than after. Like I still have 2 more years left of full-time school as a civilian. I could have been knocking that out, slowly my 6 years I was in, and I could have gotten out with a bachelor's degree. Now I'm, still pursuing a bachelor's degree. So
and you're pursuing it like full time, right? Like
and I still have 2 years left. I'm like, I could have chipped away at that while I was in.
Yeah, chipping away at it definitely makes a difference, and you have a full-time job and you have the support from work, and sometimes your schedule can be modified a little bit. So doing it while you're in definitely makes more sense. And if I'm being honest, I didn't plan on getting my degree. I only got it because somebody was talking shit at work. So, I was giving one of my talks like I always do, talking about investments, and I was successful in those things in real estate and investing. And I was telling somebody that they should take advantage of opportunities and go get their degree. Well, he asked me in front of the class, what's your degree in? Like a deer in the headlights. And I'm like, I don't have a degree. And then that's when I thought to myself, well, I better take my own advice, right? Immediately after that, I went in and signed up for school because I didn't want to be a hypocrite, right? I didn't want to tell people what to do or tell them like, yeah, you should go to school because it's an opportunity. Like, yeah, but what if it's an opportunity that's damn near impossible to do? It wasn't to prove anybody. It was more to prove it to myself that whenever I'm going to talk about something, I know what I'm talking about because I've
You're not just
experienced
talking about it.
it.
You were being about it too.
Being a good role model, that's important.
When it comes to your worst experience, and you're talking about how that really set you back like 3 years. One of those things is your maturity level probably astronomically increased after that experience because you understood that you're not immortal, and that like your actions can have major consequences. It doesn't matter if you spent the last decade of your life working super hard, all of that can go away in a day.
Whoever is watching this really needs to remember exactly what you just said. You're 100% correct. I remember Stellar Airman, got my degree. I was actually going to cross over to be an officer. I was, doing the volunteer things.
You had so many things in the pipeline that were going well.
Just one slip up. And next thing you know, I look around and everybody's like, I can't really touch you. You're kind of like the bad kid now. And
you're a liability at that point. And so people don't want to be associated with you either. So
that's right. And so that's really important to remember what you said. It's 100% true.
You put other people in a tough spot too, because not only do you lose your opportunities, but you're losing a lot of your support group because they're putting themselves at risk by trying to like do things for you.
Yeah, they try to stick their neck out and talk good about you, and then they're like, well, you're talking good about this guy and supposedly he's so awesome, but he just did this thing.
So I don't know if this rolls into this, but I was going to ask, what is the biggest lesson or the best lesson that you learned while you were in? That seemed like a pretty big lesson. I don't know if there was another lesson that you learned while you were in that has translated throughout your life that's really stuck with you.
I guess that's the hardest lesson that I had to learn, right? One of the key things, like if I go back to it and like I told you before, it's helping other people and expecting nothing in return, because people will always let you down. Yeah. If I help you move and I expect you to help me move, something's going to happen. You're going to get sick. You can't help me move and you let me down. Helping other people and expecting nothing in return is one of the things that I've learned throughout the years in the Air Force, working with other people. That's really helped me really make me grow tremendously. I have zero expectations. So you can't let me down. So if I'm helping you, it's because I want to help you. I want to be there. So it's always fun. Like every time I go help people, we're always enjoying the moment and I'm enjoying the process and I'm learning and asking questions because it's not transactional. If there's anything I've learned, it was that.
What was something that you say has translated from your Air Force experience, the 20 years that you did in the Air Force? What's the best thing that is translated to your civilian life?
I wish I could narrow it down to one, but I always think of two. I think of two. One was the work ethic. When I joined the Air Force, I showed up to my first base and my supervisor was like, hey, dude, he was a single staff sergeant. So he's like, as long as I'm at work, you're at work. And I was like, all right, cool, I could do that. Not realizing that this kid was crazy. This guy was crazy, right? And he was working 14, 16 hours a day because he wanted to be the best. He wanted me to memorize every part number on every single thing. And that really 100% helped me throughout the rest of my life because that work ethic, the ability to do the things you don't want to do, right? But just grit through it.
Yeah.
And
you're getting done what needs to be done because it needs to be done.
That's right. And the other thing that's very similar to that was when I worked in support section and when I got fired from my job, right? Because I got in trouble, they put me in support section. Support section, our job is to manage expensive equipment that you use to take care of the aircraft. And so we issue stuff out. We're kind of like the tool room, right?
Yeah.
So the maintainers come in, we give them a tool, we sign it out to their name. They rely on us to support the mission. We've got to fix these airplanes to fly them. And there was a time where somebody came in and they said, hey, we have this test equipment. It's broken and we need it repaired. I said, I'll take care of it. I took that test equipment and I chased down every avenue to try to get it repaired. And it turned out I spoke to an old man in Georgia he says, yeah, just send it to me. I have a room full of these things. Whenever the Air Force gets around to it and gets a contract, we'll fix it and send it back. And my brain was like, no, we need it fixed now. These guys need it fixed now so that we can fix airplanes. Mm-hmm. Right? The mission required it. I stepped outside of my bubble and started looking at other resources that I could pull together. And I started asking agencies that didn't repair this piece of equipment to see if they could look at it at least. And sure enough, man, we had the thing fixed in 2 days, which was compared to years that I had sent it off. Literally, I'm not even exaggerating.
Yeah.
And so we had it repaired. It was back in service. We put it back out to the aircraft and we fixed the jets. What I learned from that was, dude, when you're most uncomfortable and you go, what's the worst somebody's going to say? No.
Exactly.
And so that has helped me tremendously because I'm never scared to get a no now. It's
Mhm.
like, I'll pick up the phone and try. I'll explain to you very clearly. I'll be humble and honest, and I'll give you all the data for you to make the best decision possible. If you tell me no, that's okay. I'll go to someone else. Well, I'll figure it out, right? And so those two things are the biggest takeaways: the work ethic and the ability to hear no and continue pushing through till you get a yes.
Well, that's something too, is a lot of people kind of nervous to start something or do something. And really, at the end of the day, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? Do you get back to where you started? It's
Right.
like a lot of people will avoid taking a chance to pursue something that they want because what if they fail? And it's like,
Yeah.
you fail and you're back to where you are today.
Yeah, it sounds
So,
fun.
like,
It's
if you're
funny.
fine being where you are today,
Yeah.
then the worst that can happen is you just go back to you being here. So,
Yeah.
it's like a lot of people
It's
avoid, looking into those options or those opportunities and then following through with them because, like,
mhm.
what if I fail? What if I get told no? What if people don't support? What if nobody encourages? And it's like, so you're where you are right now, and
Yeah,
it's
no, 100%.
yeah,
And because, you're putting out this information to help people. I know you're not asking me about this one, but I'm going to give you one more that was really beneficial, which is goes back to public speaking. This is to help your viewers, right? Because
yeah,
obviously, if they're listening to this type of information, hopefully they can get one piece of info that helps them grow or be better or more successful. Piece of advice that I took, I was getting trained in public speaking to do training events for the military. And they sent me to Germany to get spun up by this group of people. And I needed to learn how to speak to people very quickly because they expected me to come back after 1 week and immediately stand on the stage and train 5,000 people.
hmm
And I was like, well, how do I get there quickly? The best solution I came up with was to start talking to cashiers. And so what I do now, and I still do to this day, it's really interesting, but I make it my goal from the time I get to the cash register or the conveyor belt. Let's just pretend you're in a grocery store. You get to the conveyor belt, you set your item down. Normally, the person in front of you is not really making conversation with the person that's checking you out. And
hmm
even if they are, you just wait till they're done. But from the moment I have an opportunity, I start a conversation with them. And then I compliment them on something that they're wearing or something that they have around them, right? Hey,
hmm
Sally, how's it going? I read her name tag. That's how I got her name. Hey,
yep,
Sally, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. How long have you worked here? I could be the only person that interacts with that person, and I could brighten their day just a little bit. And if that's
yeah,
all I get out of the situation, that makes me happy, right?
hmm
And so I'll interact with them. And my goal is to see how good of a friend Sally and I, or whoever's behind the register, can become by the time I grab my bags and leave.
yeah,
And what that's helped me do over the years, and it's helped other people that I've
yeah,
told this to, what it does is it helps you force that conversation knowing that there's an end, right? At some
hmm
point, you got to walk away. You can't stand there and talk to her. She's got a job, or he has a job to do, right?
yep,
And so it's forced those conversations. And I've actually been invited to people's houses after those one individual conversations because it
yep.
was so meaningful and so impactful. And so I recommend everybody try that, right? Have those
You're
interactions.
practicing building a relationship in a very
Yeah.
short amount of time, and so it's yeah, you're trying your best to genuinely
Mhm.
connect with people. If it becomes natural for you because you just do
Mhm.
it so often that anybody you run into or meet,
Yeah.
it's
No, and it helps you everywhere. I mean, even if you buy the wrong item and you need to return it and you're over your return period, like
yeah,
you have to talk to that person. And the nicer you are, the more down to earth and organic the conversation flows, is whether you're going to be successful in accomplishing that return or not, right?
yeah.
And so this helps you in so many aspects of your life. And so I continue to do it to this day. I hope maybe somebody's life has been cheered up by my conversations. If not, I always wish people happy birthdays and holidays and during those conversations. So hopefully I'm not the only one doing it, but even if I am, it makes me sleep well at night, and it helps me communicate.
So you're probably one of those people where your friends, family, whoever you're with is like you talk to everybody or everybody talks to you. Like you can
100%.
have a conversation with anybody. I get the same thing. People would always like joke like I could sit on an airplane and just like strike up a conversation with somebody, and sometimes I don't even like go out of my way to start a conversation. Like I don't
Yeah.
know what it is about like me, but it's like people will just, I don't know, like I'm super approachable or what, but like I've
Yeah.
had, people that I've spent time with or will be out and they're like, you can just like talk with anybody, connect with anybody. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't even think about it or realize. And I like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know why like these people are like, so many people talk to me, but it's just because like I've spent so many years of my life, like my entire life,
Yeah.
just talking to people and connecting with people in a genuine way that like, I guess, not everybody does that. And so it's easy for other people to pick out those people where they feel like they can have a genuine conversation with, or like, oh, when you talk to them, they actually listen. And it's one of those things where I'm sure you probably get the same thing where like no matter where you go, it's like, yeah, you can walk away, like you can be on a train ride and like feel like you walked away with like a friend.
Yeah.
And other people are like, oh my gosh, I would never talk to strangers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you're like over here like, oh no, they were really cool. Like, I just learned a little bit about their life. Like that was a really cool experience. And them, they're like, no, I want nothing to do with people. Like there are a lot of people that avoid conversations with strangers.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think it's because you're so authentic whenever you communicate that, and
yeah.
people, gravitate towards you. Because I've seen that, just being around you, people gravitate towards you because of how authentic you are. I think it's important, especially the way the world is going with social media and everybody's on their phones and stuff. You start
Yep.
creating that boundary, and I think that the younger generation has really moved away from that,
Mm-hmm.
and it is an important form of communication. Dude, I'm pretty sure that you have some stories to tell where you meet somebody on a train and then next thing you know, you're having coffee with them, at
Yeah.
some other location or whatever, right?
I'll always
Things
like
happen.
add, like I had strangers like on Instagram or I've messaged people and like I'll meet people that do all sorts of crazy stuff, but it's cool because you expand your horizons too, like as far as like networking, because you're like, man, I know all these people in all these different industries that do all these different things. And you just like constantly are expanding your knowledge because you're getting outside of your own little bubble of
Yeah.
what you know and what you do daily. And so that's one of the things I love about just being able to talk with a bunch of different people is no matter what their career paths are or where they've lived or where they've traveled. Like that's one of the things I love conversating with people about is, where they've traveled and what their favorite things about the places they've traveled to are and my favorite things about the places I've traveled. And you're exchanging this knowledge between two people where I'm like, I have a very like broad understanding of the world because I've conversated with so many people that have traveled to so many different places.
I think it allows you to never be bored, right? Like no matter
Yeah.
where you are, because you always have a friend, right? Someone that you can
Yeah.
meet or talk to or interact with nearby. And it definitely helps with relationships too. As you start to grow businesses, it helps there as well.
Yeah.
Recently, I was able to reach out to somebody just because we're authentic and, but you have to respond as well, right? So it takes
Yeah.
energy from the person communicating with you and you actually responding because you could easily turn around and not talk to people, or they could do the same, right? They could ignore
Yep.
you. And so I reached out to an individual, and my social media isn't cool at all. Like there's 90% of the stuff that I do, I don't even post on stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, I reached out to this individual, so I'm not an influencer or anything, and just said, hey, this is what I think. This is how we can work together. And now we're building a racing school for veterans. So the individual has a lot of experience in racing
Yeah.
and a lot of formula cars and engineering background. And so we're working together to see if we can help veterans not only get the experience that they need, but then also get certified and start working with racing teams. And so
Awesome.
that's a project where really I'm being more of a consultant where I'm helping with the veteran space, right? But it took for me to reach out to this well-known individual via email, right, who has a huge following. And then it took for him to actually read the email and respond, right? So
Yeah.
it's a two-way street. It's not just me talking to people. Yeah, you can see already how all these little instances, experiences from the Air Force have greatly impacted the outcome of my life today. But it's what you do about it. Like, it's what you do when you're in. If you just
Yeah.
go to work every day and you do absolutely nothing and you're normal, well, expect a normal outcome.
Yeah.
Expect to be a normal Joe who gets a normal job,
Yeah.
But if you want to be abnormal, you got to do things differently.
If you want all these special opportunities and connections and everything, you have to put in an effort to do that. Because if you just, put in the everyday normal effort, you're going to have the same amount of opportunities as a majority of other people's. And most of the time when we look up to people, you're looking at other people because they're thriving or they're excelling or they're having these opportunities. Well, a lot of times, if you look back on their life, there's a reason why they got to those opportunities. And it's probably because they put themselves out there for years, if not a decade or more. And they're getting these opportunities now. And it didn't just happen where they didn't just decide, tomorrow or yesterday, whatever, that they're like, I want to do this. They've been doing that for, a decade straight. And that's why they have the connections that they have, where somebody, might look at you and be like, oh my gosh, you know all these people. And you're like, you've been networking for 20 plus years, like that's the culmination of 2 decades worth of networking that has gotten you to where you are. It wasn't like you just started last week being like, you know what, I want to meet these cool people that do all these things.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where it takes work to be different. And so you can't just show up and do the average, the bare minimum, and then expect a different result. So
100%. And once you decide that you do want to be different and you do want to do the extra things that are required so that you do have a different lifestyle than the normal Joe, you just commit to it. I mean, you could be sitting in front of this video right now and be 35 years old and be introverted and not want to talk to anybody. If you make the decision today that you're going to start using these little tools and start communicating with people, it doesn't take a long time at all.
Yeah.
You start gaining a lot more confidence and it builds up. And then next thing you know, you're doing it without even thinking. And time flies. And so if you have these conversations that are meaningful, authentic, with zero expectations, you will always be successful, no matter what. Worst case scenario, you brighten somebody's day, right?
Yeah. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So these are going to be the last 3 questions we're going to run through, kind of helping advice for the whole career path that somebody goes on. So to start out, what's your advice for anybody that's looking to join right now?
That's a tough one. Well, I helped somebody get in the Air Force recently, so I guess it's the same advice. This is my advice for someone looking to join right now, is if you're young and you have a little bit of time, I say young, under the age of 21, try to chase your dreams if they're realistic. If you want to get into video editing and it's something that you wanted to do forever, try to chase that video editing path, give it a good 6 months and see if you can blow up really quick or learn something really quick. And if you see that it's not going anywhere, then say, you know what, I'm going to join the Air Force and go do that career path, right? Because then you can still do video editing once you get through your training and stuff. You can still continue to do that, right?
And if you put your head down and buckle down, the amount of experience that you'll get in those 6 months would be what some people dabble in, and it takes them 5 years to get that experience. And then the great thing about experience and knowledge is once you have it, it's there. Like it's in your arsenal. Yeah. So then you might not use it for another 5 years, but then 5 years from now, you might have an opportunity where it clicks. And thank goodness you did all that work previously. So now you have the skills when that next opportunity pops up.
Yeah. And just make sure you set a deadline, because that's the biggest mistake people make. They try to keep pursuing and chasing their dreams. And then 10 years later, they haven't made any traction. And it's like, no, set a deadline. I'm going to do this for 6 months and then I'm going to join if this doesn't pan out and I don't see much success. Success is different to any people. So make sure you know what your measurement of success is. Yeah. And if you're going to come in the Air Force and you say, or the military in general, and you've decided this is what I'm going to do, then I recommend you commit yourself 100% and start strategizing from the beginning and look at it from a business perspective, not an emotional, I want to maintain aircraft and then work 16 hours a day. And then I come home and I smell like jet fuel and I'm greasy. Yeah. Like really look at it from like one, how smart am I? How am I scoring on my scores? What jobs are available to me? Yeah. Oh, you're offering me this job. What do they really do? Oh, they really sit inside. They work 9 to 5. They have an hour lunch break and they're closed for training days. If you can handle that, then I say, you pursue that path, even though it may not be what you really want to do. You might really want to run around with a gun and shoot bad guys. But I'm telling you, that's only cool while you're young. Eventually you have a family and education and stuff that comes along and you need the time.
Yeah.
So
And
I would
eventually there's a
say,
life after the Air Force.
mhm,
And if those things don't translate super well to the civilian sector, then, or you're very limited on your opportunities unless you want to do that for your entire life, like
yeah,
your opportunities in some career paths are very limited on the civilian side. That's one of the
mhm,
things I notice about other branches is, right, you look at like people that go into the Navy or people that go into the Marines, right? Some of those career paths are very limited as far as what it does as a
yeah,
civilian, or even, in the Army, if you work on a tank, so many
mhm,
civilian jobs that you can pursue with that. Like it can
yeah,
translate a little bit if you've done maintenance on a tank, or but if you were like actually like you drove a tank, if that's what you really want to do, there's only, you're going to have to be a government contractor and still work with the military. And so if eventually you want to transition to become a civilian and have a civilian career and be, away from the military, not all branches, the Air Force probably has some of the better translations from the military to civilian, but there still even are
yeah.
some career paths in the Air Force that don't exactly translate to the civilian sector very well.
No, 100%. And if you look at that from a strategic point of view and not emotional, you'll be able to identify that quickly
Yep.
before you come in and do a whole career.
So what would be your advice for people who are currently in? Doesn't matter if they've been in for, 1 year or 10 years, just in general, like how to thrive while they're in. What's your advice for those people?
It's pretty simple, actually. Is I believe that if they make you clean the shitters, they better be the cleanest damn shitters on base, right? So whatever it is that you decide to do, really commit to doing it and doing it to the best of your ability. And so that would be the best advice. And it sounds really cheesy, I know, but it's not, because it teaches you so many things when you're focused in that and you're in that mindset that
Yeah.
anything I do, you're going to give me a job and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, and I'm going to run through walls until I figure out how to make this thing successful that you want me to do. That'll help you so many different ways other than just that task alone. So being in that mindset, I think, will benefit anybody who's in greatly.
The first episode that I did with Hugo Escobar, he mentioned that he came in as enlisted as he was a firefighter essentially when he came in.
Mhm.
And he enjoyed it, but it wasn't really what he wanted to do long term. And even though he wasn't crazy, crazy passionate about it, he still was like, I did the best that I could. Well, then when it came time for him to cross train, and then when he was applying to later try to become an officer, he was like, because I worked my butt off, even in a job that I wasn't majorly passionate about, he's like, I had all these people that would vouch for me.
Yeah,
Because he's like, at the end of the day, like your work ethic is what people are going to vouch for. And
yeah,
so if you were like, well, I didn't like the job, that's why I was lazy. Well,
yeah,
nobody has anything to vouch for you then at that point. And so it's like it doesn't matter what you do as long as you do it to the best of your ability and you give it a solid effort. That's what's going to get you the job that you actually want. Because if you are lazy in a job that you don't want, nobody's going to vouch for you when that job that you do want opens up.
correct. And when they put you in a position that you don't want to be in, it also trains you to get through it, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, you know what? You're going to work for this company. We're going to start you off in this corner over here, I don't know, handing out tools. Well, maybe that's not where you wanted to start off with the company, but if you're already in the mindset, hey, whatever I do, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, that will be identified, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what people should focus on. It'll help.
And then what's your advice for people that are looking to get out, whether, they're 2 or 3 years out, but their mindset is, I know I'm getting out. I'm starting to transition my mindset to what's next. What's your advice for people to assimilate into the civilian sector?
I think that people should be more aware of what getting out actually really means. When I was in, it was very easy for us to talk about getting out. Like it was the grass is greener, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the grass is greener till you hop the fence and you realize it's infested with ants, you know? And so you need to recognize that that is a real possibility. You may say, I'm going to get out because I've served my 4 years or whatever your enlistment is, and I'm going to go chase this wild thing. If you're not chasing what you really want to do in life while you're in, you're not going to do it when you're out. So that's my advice to people, right? If you're not doing the thing that you're waiting to get out to do, stop lying to people. You're
There
not
are
going to
things
do.
that you
You're
can
not going to
start
do
doing today to
any
start even,
anything.
yeah, chipping
There's
away at it.
really there's really very few things that you cannot do while you're in to prepare to try to execute before you get out. Unless it has to do with like the medicinal marijuana company that we started, obviously I had to be out for that, right?
Yeah.
But unless you're dealing with something like that, like, yeah, there's no excuse. The only excuse is the one that you're giving yourself. It's not
Yep.
true though. Yeah, so I would say if you're planning on getting out and that's your goal and you're set, the real question is, have you really been doing those things that you want to do on the outside that you've been waiting for?
Yeah.
Like, if I was going to get out in, let's say, a year from now, and I say, okay, I'm going to quit working as an aircraft mechanic. I'll give you an example because I really wanted this to get to people.
Yeah.
I'm an aircraft mechanic, and when I get out, I'm going to go and become a real estate agent, right? That's my goal. I want to go sell real estate when I get out. I love houses and properties and running around with people, right? Well, what are you waiting for? Like, why
Stop
have a
talking about it. Be about it.
exactly. So I told people when I would tell people, prepare to get out tomorrow and help your troops prepare to get out tomorrow
Yeah.
because that's going to make them more successful, right? So all of my young troops
Absolutely.
or anybody that I ran across, I'd say, hey, go to school, get your degree. Oh, you want to get out and be what? A real estate agent? Cool. Why don't you start now? Go get your real estate license,
Yeah.
right? And so you push people to get out because I wanted people to have the choice to stay in.
Yeah.
I wanted the Air Force to become better because I wanted people to choose to want to be there versus, oh, dang, it's not working out for me. I guess I'll stay in. I mean, we've all heard that, right?
Hmm.
Like, I guess I'll re-enlist. And it's
They
like,
get to the point and
oh,
they're like, shoot, I haven't prepared
yeah,
myself. I'm not ready. They're like, I have to switch careers and I have no experience in that. Wow, it's going to be harder for me to get a job than I thought. And so then they stay in because they realize that they weren't actually prepared to get out. And so then they're not staying in because they want to anymore. They're staying in because they feel like that's their only option to be successful.
correct. Yeah, and I think if the mentality was set more on, hey, I want to get out and this is what I want to pursue, I'm going to prepare for it now and start working on it. And then you get to the edge of getting out and you then have a choice and you can say, you know
Yeah.
what, actually I've been working that real estate thing for a year now. It's not like it all seemed on the internet.
Yeah.
YouTube videos will make it seem like it's very easy to paint your car in your garage until you actually start painting the car in the garage and then you're like,
Yeah.
this is not as easy as they make it look, right? And so that would be my advice to people. Do what you think you're going to do when you get out today.
That's very good advice. Don't procrastinate. Don't wait. Start setting up your future now.
Mhm.
Because if you wait, one, you may never start, or two, you may get to the point where you're forced to start and it's way more difficult. It's the same thing with education. It's easier to get your education while you're in. Don't wait until you get out and be like, oh, I'll use my GI Bill. Okay,
Mhm.
you can chip away at a bunch of classes and then get out and only need to take 8 classes instead of 27, right? Like I wished I would have done that
Yeah.
because, I would at this point have 1 semester left with school for my bachelor's degree, but instead I'm sitting here, and I have 2 more years left of school full time. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I'm like, man, I was just stubborn back then. And if I could go back and tell my younger self, like, stop putting it off, like, stop being like, I'll
Yeah.
do that 10 years from now, I'll do that 5 years from now. It's like, no, get as much experience early on because it's kind of like compound interest. Like it'd be like if you asked me today, hey, do you want to put $1 million in a savings account over, a 20-year span, or I can just give you $1 million right now? I'd be like, I want the $1 million right now. It's going in the savings account and it's going to build that. It's going to be worth way more 20 years from now than if you were to spread it out over that time. And so, and I had the opportunities to do that, right? To invest in myself, to pour into myself. And I was doing that in a lot of different aspects, but there were certain things that I was just being stubborn about. And looking back, you're like, dang, I shouldn't have put that off. Like I had way more energy. I had way more time. I had way more resources. Like life was way more forgiving back then. And so stop putting it off. You said like start today.
Yeah, and you could have been more successful as well if you had a friend group that was interested in those similar things, right? So if people around you at that time had been going to school, let's say,
Yeah.
right, the people that you hung out with were going to school, they would eventually maybe have talked to you to go to school,
Yeah.
and that could have been a little life-changing event there too, right? So not only is it your decision to actually execute, but also the people that you surround yourself with are going to impact your life as well. And so it's important to hang around with people that you want to be like. I did a lot of degenerate stuff as a crew chief. Like, we'd sit around, we'd get drunk, and then we'd show up to work, and they'd be like, get in the truck, don't touch anything, like, just sleep it off, And so you're in the back of the truck as airplanes are flying, and we took care of each other. But when I think back on it now, I think back like, man, I wasted so much time like hanging out with people that weren't interested in the things that I was interested in. I was interested in working. For me, it was work, a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
But I was interested in building skills, I guess. Learning new things, I guess, is the best way to put it. Had I surrounded myself with other people, it could have helped me sooner, helped me grow quicker, because we would bounce off each other, right? That energy would go. Instead, the people I hung out with would hang out and drink a lot. And so that's what you
end
did.
up doing that.
Yeah.
Well, that was like the saying, it's like, if you hang out with, 5 people that drink all the time, like, you'll be the 6th. If you hang out with 5 people that are wealthy, you'll be the 6th. Like,
there's a mom saying too. It's like, moms say it all the time. They're like, you're as good as your 5 closest friends.
Yeah.
Your mom would tell you, don't hang out with those guys. They're bad people.
Yeah.
It's like, really what she really meant, if you were just to like break it down and translate it, is, hey, if you want to have the lifestyle that they're living and you want to pursue those goals, hang out with them. Like, it'll get you there. And I also think it's important to tell people, dude, if you're not cut out to be a business person, a business owner, an entrepreneur, you're not cut out to own your own company and work for yourself. If you're just not motivated to do those things, it's okay. It's okay. Some people are really passionate about spending time with their family and working their 9 to 5, but those people should be focused on that.
Yeah.
Like, we're not saying go start your own businesses and do your own things and prepare to get out and run a major corporation or start something crazy. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to prepare to get out and you want to be successful, or while you're in, focus on the thing that you love the most and work on it. Like, every day, work on it. Be the best. If you want to work your 9 to 5, come home, drink a beer, watch sports, and hang out with your family, well, be the best at it, bro.
Yeah.
Be the guy who throws those sports parties and gets people together, right? Be the family man that takes your wife on dates and takes your children out to do the things that good dads that want to focus on that should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had a kid and I raised them fairly well. Could I have done a better job? I mean, I think everybody has their own different gauge of success, like we mentioned before.
Yep.
I don't have any regrets in my life. I think everything that I've done has been there, has worked out the way it has for a reason. And I'm pretty happy with all the decisions that I've made, except for some degenerate ones, right? But as far as raising my son, I didn't do something like I'm telling you, where it's like you stay home with your dad and you show up to all the birthday parties and stuff like that. I missed a lot of birthday parties because I was out working, right? I was building this thing. But then on the back end, I'm able to provide, I have a child who's grown up very privileged, right? That's a whole different story for another day, right? But he's fortunate enough to have been around a lot of different types of people and a lot of different cool things that most children his age would never, ever in their entire lifetime have opportunity.
Yeah. So now your kid has access to your network that you've established as well.
He does, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because, the kid's 18 years old now, and he's raced rally cars, and he's done drifting events, and he's shot one of the 2, the Predator machine gun that mounts on your back. Mm-hmm. So he's, what do they call it? The Gatling gun, right? So he's shot that thing. Like, he's flown helicopters. So there's so many things that this kid, he's lived a very privileged life that most people don't get to live. And it's a blessing and a curse, because now at his age, young-minded, they seem to think that that's the norm. And so it's a lot of work to convince him and say, hey, bro, that's not the norm. So now I have to do a little extra work to like reel it back in, right?
Yeah.
It's not normal to do these things. I think if he continues with his amazing demeanor that he has and his character, where he remains humble and he doesn't talk about those things, the school got him on the school kids got him. Bullying brought him back to earth real quick one time. They were talking about England, and I don't even have to teach him how to be humble. The school did that for me. They were talking about England, and they were talking about Stonehenge. And he mentioned how he was just there, and we were at the time I was stationed at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. And population like 20,000 people, and
Yeah.
Very, very much lower income class. And so low, I was donating basketball nets to the school for their basketball hoops because they didn't have funding for that. So he's going to school, and they were talking about Stonehenge. He brings it up that he was there, and he was talking about living in London. And the kids started making fun of him. They're like, "Oh, you've done it all, right?" And so I remember he came home from school, and ever since then, like none of the amazing things that he's done. I mean, at the time, he was like 13,
Yeah.
and from 13 to 18 there's so much that nobody knows about, and
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. But going back to what I was mentioning earlier, is if you want to be an amazing father, amazing husband, do the sports events, watching, like, dude, fucking go full throttle on it. Be the best. Like,
Yeah.
do whatever it is you're going to do, but just be awesome at it.
So that translates to getting out as well. Once if you want to get out and whatever you want to do, just throw yourself into it. Don't hold back, because that's realistically the only way that you can be successful is
Mhm.
if you're like, oh, I want to really do this once I get out. If you wait, you're holding yourself back for no reason. And then you're
Yeah.
stunting your own growth and your own opportunities and your own success.
There's no way you can look back on that and think negatively on it either, because I mean, if you were to focus on your family, you'd raise an amazing child. You would be closer to your spouse. You actually go out on dates and spend time together and build that relationship. And then if you were doing the sporting events where you're actually inviting people, you would increase the positivity in your community, right? Bring people together, start conversations. And so everybody around you would grow. So there's no way that you can really deep dive into anything that you love to do and you're passionate about while you're in, and then it not be a positive result and energy that drives you forward when you get out.
Yeah.
So go all in.
Too many people they tell themselves for years they want to do something and they never do it. And then years or decades pass them by and they could have become an expert at that and they just never started. So just dive in, start learning now. And then decades or weeks, months later, you're going to be like, wow, I'm like way better off than I was, back then. And so, you'll never look back and regret taking those chances to start pursuing what you want to do.
Nope. And it'll help you tremendously.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this interview, Art.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Even if there's any one person that it impacts them in a positive way, I mean, it's worth it.